Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzis.
Thanks so much, Dennis, for having me on. I'm a big fan of the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you here. Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I'm in New York City, right smack in the middle.
Smack in the middle. What does smack in the middle mean?
So there's I don't know how well you know New York or your listeners know New York, but there's an uptown and a downtown and there's boroughs, 5 different boroughs in the city. I'm right in the center of Manhattan, or just a little bit north of the center of Manhattan. So Midtown is where all the work happens, or when people used to go to the office, that's where all the work offices are. And I live just a little bit north of that. So a big hub of activity.
Yeah, interesting. And when you say they used to go to the office, it's really interesting how things have changed. So in where you are right now in New York City, there are people going to this office? How many are going to the office? In other words, percentage wise, or is the city feeling a little bit more of a dead city, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it changes a little over time. I feel like the city life has come back and it's vibrant again, and it's super hard to get restaurant reservations, and you see just people out and about at the parks are full. It's wintertime now, so it's a little colder, but up until then you saw people coming back out. So people are certainly out and about, but I don't think people are coming into the office as much. And I think a lot of people are at least half the week, some people more than that. There are some industries like banking, for example, in New York, where they really want people in every day. And so there's those, I think, exceptions. They're outliers. All the tech workers, people that I know, are home as much as they're in the office, and they have a lot more flexibility. And I think this is something we can get into in the conversation, but that's really something for companies to figure out is, what does this look like moving forward? What are the policies? Do they leave it up to the employees? Are they going to be rigid about what they want? And so it's really interesting to see, but a lot of people at home and getting really comfortable being at home.
Amazing how the dynamics have gone from, no, you can't work at home, you have to work from the office, and then gone because of the pandemic the other way around. And now trying to swing back again, but it's not swinging back too well. And some organizations are handling it very well and others are struggling. And it's really interesting to see the whole dynamic play out as we see it going forward. So we'll see what happens there. So Ernie, go on.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Perfect summation.
Hey, the other thing here, Ernie, is I've given the listeners already an introduction to you on the show. Now, you've got a vast experience here as a media executive for 20 plus years of experience. Tell us a little more about your background.
I grew up in Boston, which is, again, I don't know where your readers are, but not that far from New York. Boston and New York are actually rivals, sports rivals. So I grew up in Boston and then went away to college and spent a couple of years living in Japan, teaching English right after college, and then came back and knew I wanted to be a reporter. So I went to journalism school, and then I did I'm not sure if this is the track these days, but back in the day, the track was you worked at a bunch of smaller media companies as you tried to work your way up to different kinds of publications. And so I did that, and I lived in 5 or 6 different cities. And then I lived in LA and San Diego and Chicago and Washington, and then moved to Hong Kong and worked for the Wall Street Journal. And I stayed at the Wall Street Journal for 10 years, both in Hong Kong and in New York as an editor, managing reporters and managing sections of the paper and managing coverage areas, helping to launch new sections. And then in 2008, I was interested in getting more experience in digital media. And the Journal was one of the early media companies to digital. They had a site that they charged money for, more importantly, in like the 90s. Again, way before other people were thinking about it. This is when people were still thinking digital was just something it was a flash in the pan and it was going to go away. It was a trend, but not a permanent trend. And so they had a site, and a successful site. I really wanted to get experience with something that was more natively digital. And so I went and started working at digital media startups and spent the next decade working at digital media startups in a editorial strategy, content strategy kind of role. So again, managing content and teams of content producers across all different kinds of mediums. So text, of course, but video and email newsletters and podcasts and social and all kinds of things like that. A couple of years ago, I joined Pioneering Collective, where I work now. I'm a strategist at Pioneering Collective. And so I work with leaders of all kinds, mostly business leaders, on their personal brand, personal communications, helping to build the brand, clarify the brand, and then amplify it through all kinds of different communications. So we do a lot of leadership articles and help some people write books and launch podcasts. We also do strategic introductions, and we do all kinds of coaching for them. So it's a great job and a great opportunity to meet a lot of really interesting leaders.
Oh, wow. What a fascinating background and the things that you do today as well. I just got a quick question here, which is burning since you said it was living in New York and coming from Boston. Do you walk down the road with a baseball cap with a big B on it, or do you have the NY on yours?
I still have the B on mine, and I don't have a problem with it, but it's interesting. My kids were born in New York, and so they've grown up hearing me talk about Boston sports teams, and I don't envy them going to school and talking about Boston teams. They're pretty bold. They have to say they're not afraid to tell their friends that they're Boston fan, but I've stuck to my guns. I'm a Boston fan through and through.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, you've seen, based on what you just shared with us about your background, a lot of transition in the media industry, going from pre-digital into digital and to things like podcasts and things like that. What was that transition like for you of seeing it over the years of the experience that you've got? Well, how was it?
Really interesting, I think. I just enjoyed being there when things were emerging. I think when you see things emerging, unless you're one of these super smart, innovative, ahead of the curve thinkers, and they exist in all different industries, I think most people don't know if 6 new platforms pop up or 6 new formats in media pop up. I don't think most people know which ones are going to be there in 10 years and which aren't going to be there in 10 years. And so there's a lot of sort of experimentation in those early years and trying to, I'll call it dabbling, although maybe that's not the right word, but have a finger in some different things that are going on so that you can be there when these things, when 1 or 2 or 3 of them do emerge and are sustainable. But it's so interesting to see. There was a long period when there was very little innovation in media. It was, at least in the US, each market was controlled by a newspaper to a couple TV stations, a couple radio stations. And if you wanted to get a story out or get advertising out, you had to go through one of those gatekeepers. And then suddenly, in a really short period of time, probably in, 5 or 10 years, the landscape had absolutely shifted, first with blogging and then with, all kinds of different things like social and podcasting. And now it's almost the inverse of what it was. Of course, there's still top publications where people that are real influence shapers, but the landscape is so fractured and there's a lot of people essentially creating their own media. They're not part of any companies, they're influencers and they're creators, and they have the ability to bring audiences and develop monetization. And so we really, in the 20 years that I've been in the business, gone from, I think, flipped completely the model. And of course, one thing that hasn't changed, I think in the 20 years ago, if you were at one of those quasi-monopolistic media companies, you did pretty well, I think, because you had a lock on the market. What's happened now is that there's been a real renaissance, a real opening up of the media, and that's great. It's really hard to make money. And so that's the caveat here, is that anybody can put their shingle out and have sort of a media business or a platform, but it's not really easy for anybody to make it a going concern.
Yeah, it's obvious that the whole industry is being disrupted, of course, over time. It's amazing to see that whole transition happen and where it's gone. And Ernie, I know that you've actually launched your podcast as well, and it's called You Said What? Tell us a little bit more about the podcast.
Sure. I'm a real newbie, Dennis, next to you. I know you have 380 episodes or whatever it is now. I think 25, so I'm a baby, but it's a podcast about, I talk to guests about the most important conversations and written interchanges in their lives. And it can be with anybody. It can be with a child, with a parent, with a boss, with a coworker, with a significant other, with a stranger. And it's really trying to talk to people about which of those communications experiences really stuck with people and why, and how did they, in some cases, change their worldview about things. And so I like you to interview people and like to learn. And so it's a great excuse for me to meet people from different walks of life. I've had ex-NFL football players on, Broadway actors, founders and CEOs, private investigators, all different kinds of folks. And it's been interesting for me to A, hear their stories, but B, also think more about what kinds of conversations do stick with us. And it's not always the most obvious things. It's not always, sometimes you're going to have a profound conversation with somebody. And of course, it ends up being meaningful and profound. And then other times, there's moments where you don't necessarily think anything's going to happen, and suddenly something happens and stays with you for years. And so I find that really interesting. There's depth. What I found is there can be a lot of depth in sort of small communications moments, and you don't always know it's going to happen.
Yeah, wow. It's almost like those turning points in life, right? There's those things that happen and they do stay with you for a long time, but they also can be life-changing situations or moments or words or whatever that is. And it's amazing where things go that we weren't expecting it. Now, I've got a guest with me who I've been wanting to have on the show for a while, and he's a cool guy, and he is a guy who's known as the affiliate guy, and his name is Matt McWilliams. Matt, a massive welcome to you.
Hey, Dennis, thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. Hey, look, first of all, congratulations to you on your book that you just released and how it's gone for you. So it's a really cool book, listeners. It's called Turn Your Passions into Profit. So Matt, well done on that. That's really cool to see.
Yeah, that was fun. It's a dream 8 years in the making. And it's really, I think the most exciting part is that it's in bookstores. Less than one 1/100% of books ever make it in the bookstores, which is crazy. I love that it's there. I love that it's in libraries. This book, newsflash, people, you don't make that much money on books. So for me, it's all about impact with the book. And there's a time in my life 17 years ago where libraries made all the difference for me. The greats like Zig Ziglar and Les Brown, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Jeffrey Gitomer, all those people that I learned so much of what I still use today, I learned from reading books in the library. There was a time in my life where spending 15, 20 bucks on a book was a difficult decision. So to be able to read 5, 6 books a month from the local library, it was a blessing to me and still has lasting effects. So even like getting it in most of the libraries around the world's been a big deal to me. So yeah, thank you. It's been pretty cool.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned just something there, which is about not making a lot of money in books, but it's more about visibility and so forth. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute around branding and what it means for a leader and their branding and so forth. So we'll come back to that. Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we're known for nothing. Yeah, we were joking about, I had a team meeting earlier and we were joking about how I said, somebody had moved, one of our clients had moved from Texas to New Hampshire. And I said, the only thing that could ever make a man do that is his wife's family. And I was like, because that's why I moved north. And I have quite a few people, friends that I grew up in the South. I grew up in the nice warm weather mostly. And we moved up here because we wanted to pick at least one family to be closer to. And we ended up in a coin flip picking my wife's family. So now it's one of those things you can never leave because all their closest friends and all kids' closest friends and our soccer and everything is here. So we'll never leave. But yeah, I'm in Fort Wayne, which it's one of those things. Like, the thing I love about this place, I'm a city boy. I have to be 5 minutes from everything. But you can be 5 minutes, like our property, we're 5, 7 minutes from anything you could ever want. Major restaurants, stores, everything. If I plopped you in our backyard in the middle of summer when the trees are in bloom, you'd think you're out in the country. So I love it here. You can get across town in 15 minutes, and yet we have everything. About 300,000 people, but it's so spread out that it doesn't feel like a clustered city. So it's the perfect city, it turns out, for me to live in.
It almost sounds like the city that I grew up here in New Zealand, in Wellington. The greater Wellington is about $375,000 people, but I've got money on my brain at the moment with profits in the book. The thing is, you're right, it's so cool to just be able to do that. Now I live in a city, it's around about 1.7 million. There it is again, people. And it's amazing. It takes longer to get around the place, which is interesting.
Yep.
Now, tell us more about your background, where you've come from, what you've done, because I know you've had people that you've actually helped as well. Some big names like the Shark Tanks, Kevin Harrington, Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, just to name a few, Jeff Walker. And that's actually how I got to know you, actually, through the Jeff Walker side of things. So tell us more about your background, what you've done and that, because the listeners love to hear that.
Yeah, it is crazy to think where we're at now. The people that I've been able to work with, people that I looked up to for almost 2 decades in some cases. Yeah, I've worked with Zig Ziglar's company. Zig had already passed away, but I know his son and I know his business, and I've worked with them. I've worked with Tony Robbins' company and Dean Graziosi's launch, helping them. Jeff Walker, like you mentioned, Brian Tracy, Michael Hyatt. Like, these are people that I wouldn't say I don't idolize anybody personally. That's just I'm not like that, but people that I got so much value from, that people that impacted my life in such great ways. And I always looked up to them. And then we've worked with them. Like, I've worked with these people. It's amazing. Like, these people I can text and they'll endorse the book and things like that. And that came about through a weird, long stretch of circumstances. To go back to the book, the original first words in the book were from the Grateful Dead song Truckin'. It says, "What a long, strange trip it's been." And we had to delete those because it turns out with song lyrics, you have to get permission from the publisher of the song. And that's a pain in the butt. And we just decided to change the opening quote. But that's a pretty apt description of my life. What a long, strange trip it's been, because I got into leadership. I got into business by accident about 20 some odd years ago, 22 years ago now. I started my first website company and I was teaching golf schools with my dad, and my dad thankfully fired me because I was terrible at golf instruction, but that was what led to me getting into this online business world. For me, the head of that was like, we were teaching these golf schools, and on the weekends, I'd do the Friday, Saturday, Sunday golf school. 20 hours of golf school over the course of 3 days. People would pay about $2,000 a person to come. And we had 4 people come into these golf schools. It's at the age of 22, 20 hours for $4,000, because we make about $8,000 split it 2 ways. 20 hours for $4,000 is amazing at the age of 22. I was like, Dad, what if we had 10 people? Could we handle 10 people? He's like, yeah, we can handle 10 people in one of these golf schools. So I got on Google, this brand new website. I was like, Dad, there's this website called Google. He's like, what? What's a Google? I'm like, I don't know, but it's like a search engine or something. And you give them money and then they send you traffic. And we teach in the book, and what people are accustomed to today is, today you come to the website, you opt in, you create a lead magnet. That's what step 4 is all about. You create a lead magnet, they subscribe, you nurture the relationship, and then you sell something, right? But at that time we didn't know that. You came to my website, you either gave me $2,000 or you left. But about 1 out of every 200 people would give me $2,000. It cost us 10 cents a click. You do the math, $20 to acquire a $2,000 customer. Now that's not replicatable today, just to be clear. But at that time, we were getting 4, 5 people every week signing up for these golf schools. In addition to the 3 to 5 that we already had, we were having 8 to 10 people coming. There were weekends, Dennis, I would leave the weekend with $20,000. All right. There were weekends, because we would do 2 of these golf schools, right? We had a morning and an afternoon session. I'd work 40 hours in a weekend. Don't misunderstand me. It was a long weekend, but I would make 20 grand. That's insane at the age of 22 to make $20,000 in 3 days of work. But it taught me what online business was. And so I was like, okay, I'm all in. My dad fired me because I sucked at golf instruction, but I loved the marketing and the business side. So I started another company, and we were in desperate straits one day. It was Memorial Day in the US, a weekend. 2005 in the US, I was supposed to be at a barbecue. I'm supposed to be sitting by a pool. I'm supposed to be hanging out with my friends. I didn't do any of that. I spent the entire weekend trying to figure out how to set up an affiliate program, because we needed some way to bring in revenue without paying out revenue in the short term. We didn't have any more money. We were going to go bankrupt. We couldn't make payroll. And so I built this affiliate program from scratch. About 18 months later, we're doing over $1 million a month. And we could talk about that whole process if you want, but the point was, I learned some stuff along the way, and I learned how to do online marketing. I learned how to do online business and how to build systems and all those things. And so today what we do is we teach a lot of people how to do that. We teach people how to build affiliate programs, how to do affiliate marketing, how to monetize this. The book's all about creating a website around your passions and your message and the things that you're interested in, and monetizing that. That's why it's called Passions into Profits, not just how to turn your passions into a hobby or a hobby blog or a podcast. It's profits. And so that's what we help people do. And it's been a journey, but ultimately it led, like you said, to us being able to work with some pretty amazing people along the way.
That's fascinating background and story. If there was one thing that you could pull out of that as probably being one of the massive insights or lessons for you along that journey, would there be anything that sort of stands out for you?
The thing the theme that stands out in my life and in my business is the word iteration. I use that word a lot. We were having a team meeting earlier, and we were talking about a specific process in our company. I said, guys, right now we do not have a process. We don't need a process. There's a specific team member that all this work goes through right now. I said, most days he's able to get the work done in 8 hours and he's not overwhelmed. And when he is overwhelmed, he will come to me and tell me he's overwhelmed, and we'll figure it out from there. But we don't need a process for this. So right now we're going to just do it a certain way, and we'll iterate this process over time as we need it. It's moving fast and breaking things, to quote Facebook. It's just getting stuff out there and possibly screwing some stuff up along the way. That's part of that process. You're gonna screw some stuff up. You're gonna make some mistakes, but we're gonna iterate. So we're gonna get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. and we're not seeking perfection, because perfectionism is really just an excuse not to take action. And so if you look at my life and the way my business career, it's been iteration after iteration, but it's been taking action fast, making those small mistakes fast. It's like starting a website. Try things when you only have 140 subscribers. Why? Because you only have 140 people who give a crap. Make mistakes. Every time you start adding zeros, you get 1,400, you start getting a little bit more cautious. 14,000, you're nervous about making mistakes. When you have over 100,000 people who follow you, who are subscribed to your email list, you barely will try anything. So try everything when you have 140 people. Try everything when you have 500 people. Make some mistakes. Don't try to get everything systematized immediately, but then do systematize over time. And so if you observe the way we do business, we have almost two extremes. In the early stages, it's like there's no system. It's willy-nilly, throw crap against the wall and see what sticks. In the latter stages, it becomes very systematized. It becomes very McDonald's. Here's exactly how you do this and the system you follow, and here's the process. But sometimes that takes a year and a half before we reach that point.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.